The ground is cracking beneath your feet. The river is gone. The sky hasn't broken in 3 years. This is not a metaphor. This is real. And your ancestors lived through it. Not once, not twice, but over and over again for hundreds of thousands of years. Ancient humans faced droughts so brutal, they reshaped the entire course of human evolution, and they survived. Without grocery stores, without emergency relief, without a weather app telling them when it would end. So how did they do it? The answer will change how you think about your own ability to adapt. Let's go back. About 200,000 years ago, your ancestors are living in Eastern Africa. The continent is not the stable paradise you might imagine. It is wildly unpredictable. Monsoons come and go, rivers appear and vanish. Some droughts last for decades, some last for centuries. Your ancestor wakes up one morning, and the watering hole is dry. This is not a small problem. Every animal in the region depends on that water, and every predator follows the animals. Your ancestor cannot just wait it out. Waiting means dying. So what does your ancestor do? Your ancestor reads the land. This is one of the most underappreciated skills in human history. Ancient humans were not wandering randomly. They were tracking. They were mapping. In their minds, they carried detailed mental models of the landscape, where water had appeared after past rains, where underground seeps might still hold moisture, which plants indicated wet soil beneath the surface. Your ancestors knew that certain trees, like fig trees and certain acacias, send their roots deep enough to reach underground water, even in the worst droughts. They knew that digging at the base of a dry riverbed, even one that had been dry for months, could still yield water just below the surface. They were not guessing. They were applying knowledge passed down across generations. And that knowledge, that ability to teach and learn and remember, is one of the key reasons your ancestors survived when so many other species did not. But reading the land was only the beginning. When a drought truly took hold, your ancestors moved, not randomly, deliberately. Researchers studying ancient migration patterns have found something remarkable. During periods of severe drought, early human populations didn't just wander, they moved toward the coast. The coast is a buffer. Even when inland rivers dried up and inland food disappeared, the ocean continued to produce shellfish, fish, marine plants. Your ancestors learned to harvest from the sea. Some of the oldest evidence of complex human behavior, of art, of symbolic thinking, of organized community life, comes from coastal caves in South Africa, dated to exactly the periods when inland Africa was experiencing its worst droughts. The crisis didn't weaken your ancestors. In some ways, it sharpened them. Being pushed to the coast forced your ancestors to solve new problems. How you catch fish without a net? How do you crack open a shell? How do you navigate tidal patterns? Each new challenge built new cognitive pathways. Each solution required cooperation, communication, and the kind of planning that reaches beyond the next few hours. Droughts, in a strange and brutal way, may have accelerated the development of the human mind, but not every group made it to the coast, and not every drought allowed that option. For those who stayed inland, survival came down to 2 more strategies: storage and social networks. Storage sounds simple, but in a world before pottery, before refrigeration, before any kind of container except what you could carry or weave, storing food and water was a genuine technological challenge. Your ancestors used ostrich eggshells. This is not a small detail. Ostrich eggshells are remarkably tough. They hold liquid without cracking. They can be sealed with beeswax or fat. Archaeologists have found caches of ostrich eggshells buried in dry sand, hundreds of kilometers from where ostriches lived, dating back more than 60,000 years. Your ancestors were carrying water across the desert, pre-positioned, planned, like a supply chain. Think about what that requires. It requires knowing in advance that a journey is coming. It requires trusting that the cache will still be there when you return. It requires a concept of the future, a future where you are thirsty, and the water you buried months ago is exactly what saves your life. This is not animal behavior. This is human behavior. And then there are the social networks. Ancient human groups were never fully isolated. Even in the deep past, different bands of humans maintained relationships across vast distances. These were not casual friendships. They were survival infrastructure. During good times, groups exchanged gifts. They shared information. They traded tools and food. They arranged marriages between distant communities. This sounds like culture, and it is culture, but it is also insurance. When the drought hit your band especially hard, you could call on the people 200 kilometers away who owed you a favor. You could travel to their territory and be fed. The social network was the safety net. Modern researchers have studied hunter-gatherer groups that still live by these principles today, and the pattern is consistent. The groups that survive the worst conditions are not the strongest. They are the most connected. Your ancestors understood something that took scientists centuries to formally describe. In an unpredictable environment, relationships are a resource. There is one more piece to this story. Droughts don't just threaten physical survival. They threaten social cohesion. When resources collapse, conflict rises. Groups that fracture under pressure don't make it. Your ancestors had something that held them together: ritual, Shared ceremonies, shared symbols, shared stories about why the drought had come and what it meant and when it would end. These were not superstitions, they were binding agents. They gave people a reason to stay together and cooperate when the rational short-term calculation might say, run, take what you can, save yourself. The groups that stayed together outlasted the groups that scattered. So when the drought finally broke, when the rains returned and the rivers came back and the land turned green again, it was your ancestors who were still there, exhausted, leaner, but intact, and carrying with them more knowledge than they had before the drought began. Every drought your ancestors survived added another layer of understanding to the human story. New routes, new storage techniques, new alliances, new ways of reading clouds and soil, and the behavior of animals when water is near. That knowledge compounded across thousands of generations. And right now, somewhere in the ancient memory of your nervous system, in the patterns of how you think and connect and adapt under pressure, that inheritance lives on. The ground was cracking beneath their feet. The river was gone. The sky hadn't broken in 3 years, and they found a way through, because that is what your ancestors did, and that, in the end, is exactly what made you possible.